Hello, I'm Dave Osborne, CEO and General Manager of Valley Telephone. Traveling around the roads through our communities, drilling rigs are now becoming a familiar sight. They're a sign of an industry that not only fuels our local economies, but, quite literally, the world. How does it all work? Andy Grubb and Charles James of Sumar Productions were kind enough to take us through the entire process. In this first half hour, we'll explore the origins of oil and natural gas, delve into the science of locating these deposits, and research the process of obtaining the rights to drill for them. So let's get started.
My name is Andrew Grubb. I'm the drilling manager for Sumar Exploration and Production based in Corpus Christi, Texas. My job is to plan and execute drilling programs for that company in South Texas.
My name is Charles James. I'm land manager for Sumar Exploration and Production. It's an exploration company in Corpus Christi, Texas, headquartered in Corpus Christi, Texas. And we put together this project in Willacy County. There's a multitude of ways that these sorts of projects are put together. This particular project, my first job is to identify partners, negotiate agreements, put exploration agreements and operating agreements in place so that we can develop and get these projects drilled. We have geologists and geophysicists on staff. The geologists primarily deal with the subsurface control, dealing with the well logs. They're primarily the ones that come up with the ideas on where to look for possible traps for oil and gas. They're looking for reservoir quality rocks. So we look for, they'll start out with looking at well logs, identifying areas where there's reservoir quality rocks. Then they'll incorporate the seismic. The geophysicists primarily deal with looking at the seismic data that we have. It's almost all 3D seismic data now. It's been shot. We either shoot it ourselves, we have proprietary data, or we buy data.
We have to go back millions of years. I mean, the formations we're drilling into now were once shallow seabed deposits, and as the sea life dies, their bodies settle to the bottom of the ocean, become encased in the silt, muds, and sands that also are filtering to the bottom of the ocean at all times. And as those marine organisms decompose, they generate hydrocarbons, which under temperature, high temperature and pressure become natural gas and in some cases crude oil that we have today. What we have is solid rock that has microscopic pores in it, almost like a sponge if you can imagine that, but the holes in the sponge are just tiny, tiny. Can't even see them with your naked eye. And that pore space is where the oil and gas are found, and which is why we have to fracture it in order to get it to flow, because it won't flow on its own. And along with the marine animals, you also have seawater that's encased in the tiny pores in the rock space, so that's why we almost always have some salt water encased in these reservoirs also. And so over time, depending on how the earth tilts and moves, over time, the gas and oil that are created by the decomposition of the marine life will migrate just due to gravity. Oil and gas are lighter than water, so they'll try to migrate uphill underground. The water will move farther down, and you'll collect little pockets or pools of oil and gas in porous rock deep underground. The sands we're going for are it actually is a sandstone. I may use the word sand, but that doesn't mean it's like beach sand, it's loose. This is consolidated hard rock, a sandstone. And it is of Frio age. It's younger than Jurassic and Triassic. This is younger than the dinosaurs, but a lot older than we are. But it is a sandstone, not a shale. This is not one of the shale plays you may have heard about a lot.
There's two components, to every oil and gas project, two primary components, and you have to have reservoir quality rocks, so you have to have reservoir, and you've got to have a trap. In other words, if there's not something there to trap the oil and gas, it just migrates through, or has migrated through.
After the marine organisms fall to the bottom of the ocean is the earth tilts. A lot of that tilting and structural change is due to faulting, which can tilt those initial level layers into something tilted. If you have a fault up here, the sandstone may be, whereas it had been continuous sandstone, when something is faulted or fractured due to tectonic movement, suddenly they shift, they're offset, and you have a sandstone that is truncated against a shale formation, which keeps the oil and gas trapped at that point. And so that's what you look for, one form of trap.
A common trap is generally in this area fault traps. You can have four-way anticlines. Those were the most simplistic traps at the time, where you had all stratas laid down originally horizontal. There's something that causes something different to happen in the subsurface that would create a trap. A four-way anticline is where you just have a bump, basically. In these traps, you know, you have gas is the lightest substance, so it's going to be at the top. Then you have oil, and then of course water.
The sandstones that we produce in South Texas are typically bounded and sealed by the shales. As tight and as hard as it is for the oil and gas to flow through these sandstones that I've described, it's virtually impossible for them to flow through the kind of shale rock that we have in South Texas. So a typical sandstone that we would produce will have an overburden. I mean, the rock immediately on top of that would be a shale, and immediately below it would also be a shale.
We have geologists and geophysicists on staff, and it's their idea. They generate these ideas all the time, these prospect ideas, places that we can drill for oil and gas. A geologist primarily concerned with the subsurface control and coming up with the idea of where, okay, this is an area where we know there's a good reservoir.
By using the location of old successful wells in conjunction with seismic data, Chuck is able to make an educated guess as to where the best drill locations should be. Now that we know how hydrocarbons form and where to find the best drill sites, Chuck James will take us through the process of acquiring mineral rights when we return.
It's been therapeutic to record what I go through on a day-to-day basis.
I just remember thinking, what am I gonna do? I have a newborn. I can't lose my wife.
What they did for me was give me that break to be able to get it together.
Hi. Comfort to me is knowing that out there, her life still goes on, and those recipients.
And once you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go from there.
People know that there is always hope.
Regardless of where you're at in your life, you just don't know what's going to happen or who's going to be there to help you.
It still hurts, and I just want it to be okay.
You gave me life.
I looked down at my hands and realized I'm doing CPR.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this guy.
There's a lesson to be learned. Life is short. Make it worthwhile.
Can you see me?
VTX1 now offers affordable advertising rates on top-rated networks on the most popular shows. Now you can grow your business by choosing to advertise on the programs your customers watch. Take advantage of VTX1's TV coverage area and reach your customers with your own TV commercial. VTX1, we've got you covered. Call 1-800-446-2031 to get started today.
Oil and natural gas form over millions of years in deposits deep within the earth. As difficult as locating these resources can be, it may be even more tricky to acquire the rights to drill for them.
Once we establish a prospect, we identify a prospect that we want to pursue, then it becomes my job then to put the project together. You know, if we go out and look at the land, who owns the land. I have guys that go out and they'll research the mineral title to the land in the courthouse. If it's open, they'll buy oil and gas leases on it. If it's controlled by another company, I usually get more involved in, you know, trying to figure out a way to work with another company to get the, you know, maybe held by production from other production that company has, or they just have the leases. There's multiple kinds of deals that you can negotiate with these companies, but it's primarily then my job to negotiate with these companies and negotiate the contracts so that we acquire that interest in that leasehold so we can include it in our project. The landowners, if they're the mineral owners, and the way that it is now, you know, there's oftentimes multiple mineral owners. The surface owner may or may not own minerals. But if it's mineral owners, then we go to them and we negotiate oil and gas leases on it, generally. And we acquire oil and gas leases, which is basically a contract between us and the mineral owners, which allows us the opportunity to go in and drill oil and gas wells. I've had tracts where I've had 100 mineral interest owners. I've got to go get leases from all of them.
Each one is a separate contract?
Every mineral interest owner I want a lease from. So I will go out and endeavor to acquire oil and gas leases from all mineral interest owners. Now, most of the time it's not that bad, but anymore, I mean, it's not unusual to have 6, 7, 8 mineral interest owners in a tract. I mean, it's just the way that it's, you know, it's cut up, like you said. Somebody reserves a mineral interest, they sell the surface of the land and part of the minerals, and they retain part of the minerals, and then they pass away and they're heirs, and before you know it, you know, you've got more and more people every generation. There's more and more people involved. Now, there's a difference between mineral and royalty ownership, you know, because you may have the leases that we acquire from the mineral interest owners. You may have yet other people that own just royalty interest, and they don't own. The difference being that they don't own the full mineral estate, which is the rights to the bonus and delay rentals and you know, oftentimes some of the royalty, and then you can have people that just have an ownership in the royalty interest. I don't really need the oil and gas leases from them. Now, what oftentimes we'll do is we'll get them to ratify the oil and gas lease at the mineral interest owner, but they're kind of at the mercy of the mineral interest owner, you know, depending on how much royalty they get.
Drill sites are home to many large pieces of machinery. Though everything is done to ensure a safe work environment, some landowners may be wary about liability for any accidents.
The landowners aren't liable. All the risk as far as, you know, drilling the oil and gas well is on the operator and their partners. You know, it's clear in the operating agreements that you have with your partners that interest is that sort of obligation is shared, but the primary responsibility is on the operator to act in a prudent manner, and all the risk is on them. Most leases now have what's called indemnity clause, where you indemnify the mineral interest owners against any kind of third-party suit or third-party claim against any sort of injury or anything like that, and mineral owners are not liable for that sort of thing.
When we return, we'll learn about the final legal hurdles that must be overcome to begin drilling.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel like a fish with no water.
Learn how to prevent your child's next asthma attack, because even one attack is one too many.
Millions of people are affected by disaster in America, and we're right there, providing food. With more than 200 food banks, reaching communities all across America. Donate now for immediate relief and long-term recovery. Every dollar helps provide food for disaster victims. Help now at feedingamerica.org.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities, to ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give. Advocate. Volunteer.
Live united. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
How far would you go to help someone? Would you go to the end of your driveway? Would you cross a street? Would you cross an ocean? To a place 6,000 miles from home? And how long would you go? Would you go for a week? A month? A year? Would you go for 2 years? Would you go if you could use your knowledge to teach someone, and in the process, maybe learn something yourself? Life is calling. How far will you go? Peace Corps.
It's a long process to acquire the rights from the landowners, but even after that, Chuck James' work isn't done. He still has to clear everything with the state.
Once we put the project together, in other words, we acquire, whatever leasehold we can acquire, we deal with whatever companies are involved in our project, then we'll identify a drill site. Once we identify a drill site, then I will have an abstract prepared. An abstract is basically every legal instrument that affects the tract of property that we're going to drill on. It's recorded in the courthouse, will be put together. Copies of it are made and it's put into an abstract of title, basically, that I present to a title attorney who renders a title opinion on it. His opinion on who owns all the mineral interest and how it's owned and what problems there are associated with that ownership. So once I get a title opinion, I'll know that if I bought oil and gas leases from the right people, and even if I've required oil and gas leases from the right people, there's oftentimes requirements in the title opinion. In other words, there's flaws in the title. Somebody didn't execute the deed properly, or the wrong guy executed the deed. It can be any number of things. And so we have to cure the title opinion to make sure that we have clean title to the tract of land that we're going to drill. In other words, we want to make sure that we own all the rights before we spend a lot of money to drill the oil and gas wells. And that's really what that process is.
The petroleum industry has brought new life to many of our neighboring towns. It provides fuel for heating our homes, cooking our food, and powering our vehicles. So where does all this money go, and how does it benefit our economy?
This particular well, the Studebaker number 1, is going to cost, I estimate that while the drilling rig is on location, we will spend about $3.4 million. That does not include the 3D seismic, and the land work, and all the geology work that was done before we move on the rig. To complete the well, if we're fortunate enough to do so, I'll spend another $2.3 million. So all in all, we're going to spend probably about $5.6 million on this well from the time the rig moves on until we have production ready to go to sales. At any given time, there'll be anywhere between 15 and 20 people on location that are all employed in drilling this well. There's probably Sumar Exploration is the operator, the general contractor, if you will. And we will have usually representatives from 4 or 5 subcontractors working for us on the well. The drilling rig is the main contractor and has the most people on location. The drilling fluid is another company, and they'll have their people on location. The rock bits, the casing, the cementing, all those are provided by specialized companies that have their own personnel. Of course, like any business, we pay taxes. In general, pardon me while I look at my notes, I want to make sure I get the numbers fairly right. I estimate that this well, while we're drilling, we will spend, as I said, we'll spend about $3.4 million on the drilling phase. And on top of that, we will pay $220,000 in sales taxes to the state and local taxing agencies. If we're fortunate enough to make a producing well, then like any property or business owner, we pay property taxes. And so this well would probably then pay the Willacy County property tax agencies somewhere around $800,000 to $1 million in property taxes over the life of this well. The state of Texas gets tax revenues not only through the sales tax during the drilling of the well, but they also get a cut on the, they tax the minerals, the oil and gas we produce as we extract them. And typically on a well, such as if we're lucky enough to find one here, might be $1.5 to $2 million in taxes to the state. So overall, you're looking at a tax payments on this well over the life of the well of, oh goodness, $2 to $3 million if it's a producing well. So there's a lot of economic benefit and a lot of economic activity to what's going on out here. Particularly in South Texas is one of the great things about this part of the world in the Permian Basin. Why we've been able to produce oil and gas for so many, many years is that a lot of these wells will penetrate not just one sandstone containing oil and gas, but they'll have multiple reservoirs up and down the hole. That's a good problem to have, and you do, and again the Railroad Commission controls that too. They want to make sure that people just don't open those zones indiscriminately, because you can cause yourself problems if you open a deep zone at very high pressure and then at the same time open up a shallow zone at low pressure. You can start getting flow from the zones, what we call cross flow from one zone underground into another underground zone. And sometimes that gas is lost forever. You can't get it out. Nobody wants that to happen. But you do. You usually work your way, or if in a well, and since when you have stacked pays, multiple layers, you start at the bottom and work your way up.
And you seal yourself off.
Each one, as it's depleted, it's sealed off before the next one is opened, and the Commission has very specific rules on how that's done.
In the state of Texas, the Railroad Commission oversees all the rules and regulations pertaining to the petroleum industry.
There are a number of state agencies that get involved in how we operate and drill our wells. The lead agency that we deal with in Texas is the Texas Railroad Commission. Now, why something called the Texas Railroad Commission governs oil and gas, I don't know. I'm sure there's a story there too that's interesting, but that's the way it's set up in Texas. We have to submit plans to the Railroad Commission before we do any work, telling them exactly where we're going to drill the well, how deep we're going to drill it. We had to provide them information on the ownership of the mineral rights all around us to show that we do have the right and permission from everyone involved to drill a well before we can get started. Now that's just the legal aspects on who owns the oil and gas. The design of the well is also governed by the Railroad Commission. Their primary concern is to make sure that we design wells that, first off, protect the public from any potential accident. Secondly, protect fresh water from contamination due to our operations. And third, to make sure there is no waste of oil and gas to the environment. Then once they, that's what they govern through the drilling process. Once a well is completed, their goal is to make sure that we continue to operate in a safe manner, that oil and gas is accounted for and taxes are paid, and that again, the public is protected against unsafe operations. And finally, they make sure that we, at the end of the life of the well, they make sure that we dismantle the well, abandon it, such that it's not a source of pollution or a source of an unsafe condition to the public. So the Railroad Commission watches us from beginning to end.
But who makes up the Railroad Commission?
Well, the people in charge, the three railroad commissioners, are elected officials. People elect them in statewide elections every few years. They're the ones that are in charge of overseeing and making sure that the laws are enforced. The Railroad Commission hires geologists, they hire environmentalists, they hire freshwater experts, they do hire some oil and gas geologists and engineers to help monitor the industry and write the regulations. So it's a mixture. And they've got lawyers, in case
Everybody does.
everybody has to have lawyers.
Obtaining the rights and permission to drill is just the beginning of a long and meticulous process. In our next half hour, Chuck James and Andy Grubb will show us how they get oil and natural gas out of the ground and into our homes and vehicles.
Here at VTX, we strive to revolutionize the broadcast experience for our viewers.
Romaine, lettuce, and red onion came from my garden. They sure did. So let's begin by chopping the broccoli.
It's all the same fungus, but I'm getting them from different sources. One of the sources we're using is a frozen huitlacoche.
Our team consists of 4 highly skilled video professionals producing 3 television shows spotlighting the VTX community and a sports educational network dedicated to broadcasting weekly educational programs and sporting events. Our objective is to reach those around us and make a difference.
Tell me when your son used the maroon and the blue uniform. Tell me those stories.
The Vino y Oro, which is the maroon, they call it Vino y Oro, was for his doctorate when he was 18 years old. He became the youngest American in history and the only American since then.
By providing 2 extra channels free of charge, we're able to connect with individuals showcasing events, special announcements, and people and places that make up our community.
Flavor is very mild.
Okay.
We can add salt if you like, but we're not gonna do it right now. So instead we're gonna put the bacon so that's very salty.
Saltiness. There you go.
The joy our viewers get when they see themselves portrayed in such an amazing way makes it all worth it.
La misma técnica y el valor con el que uno nace y que ese valor crece cuando se dominan los sabios de torear.
20,000 acres of brush land at a time, and hire crews from Mexico to come up here and live in the brush in tents and clear brush by the acre.
So if you have a great story, please contact us at 956-642-1305.
We could see that the weather was kind of getting bad. Here's the crawl space, the hole. That's what saved our life. But that night, immediately, the Red Cross was there. That volunteer, he didn't even know us. He just knew that there was a family with 2 younger kids who didn't have a place to go. That was the Red Cross. I knew that's what they stood for. They help people.
After navigating the arduous legal and regulatory waters needed to obtain the rights to drill the oil, the fun part begins. First, the land has to be surveyed and leveled. We joined Andy Grubb on location.
I'm here on the Studebaker farm near Raymondville, Texas. We're going to be drilling a 13,000-foot well here for natural gas coming up in April. The process begins with the company acquiring a 3D seismic survey to image the subsurface structures to locate the best place for us to drill for oil and gas. Following that, based on our findings on seismic, we will acquire mineral leases from the mineral owners in the area. Today, we were here with the surveying company to locate the exact spot where we will drill the well and to lay out the boundaries of the access road and the location pad for the drilling rig. The area the rig will require will be about 1 to 2 acres of land. The caliche pad will be about 200 by 200 feet in dimensions. We will build the pad a minimum of 6 inches thick to support the weight of the drilling rig and the casing. Directly under the drilling rig itself, the pad will have what we call a strong back, which is a thicker section of caliche that will be about 1 foot thick. That'll all be compacted and watered, again, to support the weight of the rig. The rig itself weighs several million pounds. The weight of the casing that we will run into the well as we drill it will be on the order of 600 to 700,000 pounds.
A couple of weeks later, we caught up with Andy at his office.
All right, well, the last time we were out here, we were staking the location, and since then, Oates Construction came out, built the caliche pad, and cleared the lands for the drilling rig to be moved in. Before the large drilling rig moves in, we move in a small rig called a rat hole driller. It's just a trailer-mounted auger type drill to set a conductor pipe.
Rat hole driller?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of funny nomenclature in the oil business. Don't ask me where it came from, rat hole and mouse hole. But that small rig comes out, sets the conductor, which is a vertical hole, through which the main oil well or gas well will be drilled. In addition to that, they drill a mouse hole, which is a small diameter hole up to about 30 feet deep, in which we store extra drill pipe. And then the rat hole is drilled a little bit farther away from that, which is where they store the Kelly. We don't drill through that. It's simply a hole drilled partially into the ground so that we can put that long 40-foot long Kelly out of the way someplace. Instead of having it have to lay on the ground, they can just put it in at an angle that makes it easier for them to pick it up and lay it down when they need to. That hole will be completely filled with dirt again at the end of the job. It doesn't stay after the well's drilled. That's the first thing that happens. In this case, as I said, it was a 20-inch diameter conductor pipe. In this well, we set it at 52 feet in a nice hard clay interval. That pipe is cemented into place. That small rig moves off, and then we move in the big rig outside over that hole. I'll pump this is our 2-inch pipe. I'll have a cement truck pump cement down this 2-inch pipe all the way to the bottom, and then that heavy cement will fill up the outside space around that pipe. So that 20 inches cemented into the ground, solid all the way around.
Okay.
I'll fill that hole from bottom up with cement. It's not always done that way, but I always do it that way because it's a better way I get a better cement job that way. Some people do, if it's shallow, like if you're only setting the conductor pipe, it's say 20 feet or 30 feet. Some people will just bring a ready mix truck and pour cement into the outside of that pipe. We pick up a 17.5-inch diameter bit, and to use our visual aids here, that goes down the inside of that 20-inch piece of pipe, and in this case, for this Studebaker well, we drilled a hole that's 17.5 inches in diameter down to a depth of 2,000 feet. Now, that is our surface casing depth. The purpose of that hole and then the casing we run in there is to protect fresh water, any kind of usable water, from potential contamination. So we'll stop when we get below the depth of the deepest fresh water, which is governed by the state, in this particular 2,000 feet in this area. And actually that's even deeper than we had to go, but to make the well safer, we stopped at 2,000 and asked permission. The state reviewed our request and allowed us to go to 2,000 feet. We run a string of casing that's 13 inches in diameter inside the 20-inch diameter pipe, and then you have that gap again between the 20-inch diameter pipe and the 13-inch diameter pipe. We pump cement down the inside of the 13-inch diameter pipe. It overflows at the bottom and then comes up into the gap between the outside of the casing and the hole, and we fill that annular space from the bottom of the 13-inch casing at 2,000 feet all the way to the surface with a complete sheath of cement. We displace the cement with a rubber plug, and then on top of that rubber plug we pump more drilling mud to keep the cement from being contaminated, and then the rubber plug is caught in a latch at the bottom of the 13-inch casing, so it holds the cement in place while it hardens. Concentric layers of cement and steel between the borehole in the center and the natural earth outside. One of the purposes of that casing is to isolate anything we do in the lower part of the hole from the upper part of the hole. We want to make sure that when we find oil and gas, we know where that stuff is at all times. We want it to stay in the wellbore so we can sell it. We don't want it leaking off in any other formation where we don't know where it goes. A drilling rig is a collection of maybe 3 primary equipment systems. First, we have a hoisting system. That's the tall mast and derrick that you see sticking up in the air. That's the most recognizable part of a drilling rig. The mast on the drilling rig in this case is 135 feet tall. That is there to raise and lower the drill pipe and casing in and out of the wellbore. As far as making the whole part of the hoisting system, we have the rotating table and the Kelly. You mentioned a yellow block that's moving up and down the derrick. That's the traveling hoist, which lifts pipe in and out of the ground. While we're drilling, we attach a hexagonal shaped piece of steel pipe, which is hollow in the inside. That's what actually rotates and drives the bit to grind up the rock and make the hole.
The hexagonal hollow pipe, known as the Kelly, works off the rotary table, and fitting through a hexagonal hole is free to move up or down. Fitted to the Kelly is a length of drill pipe. More and more of these 30-foot sections are added as the well goes deeper. At the end of the drill pipe is the drill collar, and below this, the bit. There are many different kinds of bits.
Drill bit technology has changed a lot over the last 20 years. The bits that have been used for most of the life of the oil and gas business in the United States are tricone bits that were developed by Howard Hughes Sr. back in the 20s. We still use those in some areas, but over the last 20-25 years we've developed new bits called polycrystalline diamond bits, or PDC bits. They use synthetic diamonds to scrape away the rock. They're much more durable than the old tricone bits, and they, in some formations, they drill much, much faster. And so that's one thing that's enabled us to drill wells much faster today than we did 20-25 years ago. The drilling crew is comprised of floormen. There are usually 3 floormen. They're the least experienced or the newest employees. The derrickman is the man who has to climb up the mast and is more experienced, a senior floorman, so to speak. And once he becomes sufficiently accomplished and experienced, he would be promoted to become the driller. And the driller is the man that's supervising and operating the rig from minute to minute to minute during his 12-hour shift. The tool pusher oversees 2 or 3 drilling crews. There are a couple of ways our company superintendent or company man on location can monitor operations. He can be up on the floor with the driller and the rest of the rig crew watching what's going on minute to minute, and he does that much of the time. However, there are times when he can't do that, be there in person. So around the location, we have these monitors that enable both the tool pusher and our company man to see certain important drilling parameters that are ongoing. We have the depth of the hole, we have the hook load, how much weight of pipe is hanging in the derrick. We can tell how fast the pumps are pumping. We can tell pump pressure, which in this case is 1,760 pounds per square inch. We can tell how much flow we have, which is the pump flow, not the well flowing itself. We don't only have these monitors on location, but I have one back in my office in Fort Worth, so I can monitor what's going on as well. The meeting today we had on location is often called a spud meeting. Again, another one of those terms in oil and gas. Spudding is when the well starts to drill. It has nothing to do with potatoes. I have no idea where that came from, but before a well begins, or shortly after it begins, I like to get all the parties and companies involved together in one room, go through the plan step by step by step, make sure that everyone understands the well design, the potential problems we may face, so that we are all on the same page and as well informed as we can be before we get too involved in the drilling operation. Gives everyone a chance to ask questions and clarify any uncertainties they may have about their role in the drilling operation.
During the drilling of the well, there will be operations will go on for 24 hours a day. There will be anywhere between 15 and 30 people on location at any given time. The rig crews will live on location while the well is being drilled. They'll have their own bunkhouses and kitchen facilities. The crews work 12-hour shifts, day and night, not stopping or shutting down for anything. It's hard work, pays well, but it's a hard life. The rig crews spend a lot of time away from their families.
When we return, we'll take a look at the second of the oil rig's three systems, the circulating system.
This is where my house used to be. Tornado just walked right up that street. Imagine.
I lost everything. The Red Cross helped me get housing, and hundreds of people here in Branson, they helped. And they're still helping right to this day.
It's a beautiful day out here, sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it, let's go.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities. To ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete, or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give.
Advocate.
Volunteer.
Live united. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
Me llamo Raquel Mendoza y esta es mi vida. Mis hijos están envueltos en muchas actividades. Eso requiere mucho estrés y correr para acá y para allá. A veces mi familia necesita un escape. Este lugar trae mucha paz y hay mucha calma, mucha naturaleza. Quiero regresar con mi familia más seguido.
Encuentra el bosque más cercano en descubreelbosque.org. El bosque, más cerca de lo que crees.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel like a fish with no water.
Learn how to prevent your child's next asthma attack. Because even one attack is one too many.
After going through the ins and outs of the hoisting and drill system, Andy Grubb continued on to the circulating system.
The second system we have is a circulating system, and that's in which we have steel tanks to hold our drilling fluid, mud, mainly water and clay, large pumps that circulate the drilling fluid from the steel circulating tanks through the Kelly hose, down the Kelly, through the drill pipe, down to the bottom of the hole and back out to carry out the rock that we've drilled up into the shale pit. And also keeps the drill bit and drill string cool. The pumps will pump at around 500 to 600 gallons a minute, and we'll rock that back to where they're only pumping 70 to 100 gallons a minute if necessary. It's the first piece of equipment that the mud runs over as it comes out of the well is called the shale shaker, and it has a table which is covered with a very fine mesh screen. It shakes and separates the cuttings of rock from the fluid. The fluid drops through the screen and is reused, and the small pieces of rock, the cuttings as we call them, are shaken out into a pit where they're then recovered and buried. And then the mud is just cleaned through various stages of separation until it's clean enough to go back down the hole. The third purpose of the mud system is to control formation pressure. The pressure in the pores of the rock naturally increases from the top of the ground. As we go deeper, the pressures get higher and higher. So we have to make sure that the pressure exerted by that column of fluid, like the same pressure you feel at the bottom of a swimming pool on your ears, when you go from the shallow end down to the deep end, it gets hot, you can feel the pain in your ears. That drilling mud exerts higher and higher pressure the deeper we go to make sure that the oil and gas and salt water that we drill through stays in place. We don't want that coming into the wellbore uncontrolled. Drilling fluid systems can get pretty complicated as we get deeper and the temperatures increase as they become less and less stable. It's more difficult to maintain the proper density, proper viscosity. So we'll have a mud engineer, a man that's been trained in the chemistry of mud systems and is well experienced in drilling wells, to stay on location 24 hours a day along with our representatives. He's one of those 15 to 20 people that's on location all the time, and his job is to keep a close eye on the fluid properties, making changes or treatments as needed to maintain properties of the mud. Two of the most important properties of our drilling system are the density of the fluid and the viscosity. We'll talk about viscosity. That's just the resistance to flow, or how thick a fluid is. Water is usually the standard by which everything else is measured. We all know how fluid water is. We also know that milk, it's also a fluid, but it's not as thin as water. It's thicker, and so that means it has a higher viscosity. Motor oil is even thicker still, and it has a higher viscosity. We have to control the viscosity of our drilling fluid, our mud, by additions of clay. It's essentially water and clay mixture. We increase the viscosity so that it will carry those cuttings that we drill out, the rock cuttings, it can be carried out of the hole and keep the hole clean. Plain water just simply isn't thick enough to carry the cuttings out. So that's the property of viscosity. Density is how much a fluid weighs. A gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. A gallon of salt water from the ocean weighs 9 to 10 pounds, depending on where you are. A gallon of water out of the Dead Sea weighs 10 pounds. And our mud, depending on the formation we're drilling, we want that mud to weigh either 8 pounds or 10 pounds, all the way up. In the case of this well, our mud will weigh as much as 17 pounds per gallon, twice as much as a gallon of water. We get that increased weight or density by adding barite, which is an iron oxide or an iron ore compound ground up very small. And again, the mud has to have viscosity so that heavy barite doesn't settle out to the bottom of the hole. It needs to stay suspended in the mud. So the density and viscosity work together. We will use freshwater mud in this hole until we get down to 10,000 feet. After that casing string is set, we will displace the freshwater-based system with an oil-based system. Ultimately, when we drill to the final depth, this well will be drilled to 13,000 feet. So once we've set pipe at 10, we've got 3,000 more feet to go. And the mud weight will increase from 13 pounds per gallon up to 17 pounds per gallon at TD. That's a bottom hole pressure of almost 11,000 pounds per square inch. The surface pressure, atmospheric pressure here on the top of the ground is 14.5 pounds per square inch. So it's very, very high pressure, which is why we use multiple strings of casing, of steel casing and cement to make sure everything's isolated and controlled. And it gets very hot, and then we discussed earlier some of the chemicals that go into it, which is primarily just water and clay, the bentonite clay. At very high temperatures, that bentonite clay gets thick. And you can see how the mud at surface temperatures, like today, it's almost just like water or milk, maybe a milkshake. It is the way it's supposed to be. At very high temperatures, it can almost become silly putty or a DQ blizzard consistency. Can't pump that stuff, it's too thick. The oil-based system is safer to use in deep wells because it's much more stable at high temperatures, and it's easier to maintain at high temperatures and pressures. From that point on, none of the mud or the cuttings hit the ground. We go to what is called a closed loop system, in which we collect all the cuttings, all the waste mud in steel pits, which are hauled off to a licensed disposal facility. We have a man on location. In this case, we'll put him, he'll install his equipment in his small portable lab on location at about 8,000 feet into the drilling operation. He'll collect samples that we drill, samples of the rock, samples of the gas and fluids if we recover any, to try to estimate and keep track of exactly where we are in the geologic interval. Two reasons for that. Number one, he wants to report any signs of oil and gas that he may observe as we're drilling, which would be good news for us. But the other thing is he wants to help us find and detect signs of changes in pressure that we talked about earlier. That will give us an idea on how close we are to needing to set our next string of pipe, how close we are to our target, so we can prepare for any problems that may crop up before we run into them. The cuttings from an old rock bit might be, they're all irregular shaped, but they might be a ½ an inch or so in size. Some of the cuttings out of these polycrystalline diamonds that we use today are anywhere from like sand grain size up to maybe the size of your fingernail, like a dime or half the size of a dime, much smaller and finer. It makes it kind of harder to interpret the cuttings as they come across the shaker. The mud logger that we had here, he'll be on site to try to keep track of where we are in the formation, how deep we are, how close we are to our targets. That job has become much more difficult using PDCs because the rock samples he gets are ground up so much smaller.
After the break, we'll take a look at the third and final system on an oil rig, the pressure control system.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
In a 1-year span, I'd counted over 100 blood transfusions. That whole experience, Lindsay's experience, changed our whole lives. Just changed our outlook on everything. Sometimes you take things for granted that you shouldn't. We all do that, but wow, we don't do that much anymore.
Want to know more about interesting people and places in South Texas? Follow me on a journey of inspiration and insight that will offer a deeper connection with people and businesses in our community.
This is called scary situation now. This is not an easy business.
Don't miss new episodes of Backroad Reporter with Annie Studebaker on VTX TV Channel 1.
Peace Corps is a life-defining leadership experience. Volunteers live, learn, and work with a community overseas for 27 months, providing grassroots assistance.
Peace Corps is special because volunteers get to work firsthand with community members. We build personal relationships. We are in the homes, we are in the community centers, we are in the organizations. We are just amongst the people, making decisions with them, interacting with them on a daily basis.
After the 2 years of serving the Peace Corps, I feel like I have brought something to the table. Looking back and seeing what I have given, I can honestly say that I've received 10 times as much back.
Explore how the Peace Corps can fit into your future. Be a volunteer.
Watch the full PSA at a screen near you. Visit peacecorps.gov/be.
The entire drilling operation is highly dependent on a well-functioning drilling fluid system to bring cuttings to the surface, keep the drill bit cool, and maintain well-bore pressure. But all this means nothing if a blowout occurs. This brings us to the drilling operation's third system.
The third system that we have is our pressure control system, called blowout preventers or BOPs. And that's what we have on the surface of the ground to make sure that oil, gas, other fluids that we drill through cannot be released uncontrollably to the surface environment. Right now, now that we've set the and cemented the surface casing in place, before we drill any deeper, we install our blowout preventer equipment. And that is welded and bolted to the top of the 13-inch pipe. And it has an internal diameter of about 12¼ inches. So the blowout preventer equipment is put in place. We pressure test the casing that we just ran and the blowout preventer equipment to 3,000 psi to make sure it's completely air and water tight before we drill farther. That's what they're doing right now. Then we pick up a 12-inch diameter bit that fits just inside the 13-inch casing that we set. That will be the hole size we drill down to, actually all the way to 10,000 feet in this case. You mentioned 8,000 feet, and that's the point at which the natural pressure gradient in the earth changes from the water gradient you described, half a psi per foot, down to about 8,000 feet, and then that pressure in the earth starts to increase. And so at 8,000 feet it works out to about 8 pounds per gallon, the density of fresh water. By the time we reach 10,000 feet, our mud density to control the pressure will be up to 13 pounds per gallon. Over 50% higher pressure at that point than up at 8,000 feet. And then we'll change our mud properties. But we can drill that entire interval without having to run another set of casing because the formation's strong enough to withstand that change. Once we reach 10,000 feet with our bit, and we think by my design that's as deep as we can safely drill without running the risk of fracturing the shallow formations, we stop drilling. We run open hole formation logs to tell us just to measure the properties of the rocks we've drilled through, make sure we know where we are within the geologic column. Then we run another string of pipe, which is roughly 9½ inches in diameter. And in this particular case, it will be actually 9 5/8 inch outside diameter and about 8½ inches internal diameter. So that pipe is getting thicker. It's a 1/2 inch thick diameter wall. First, we remove the drill bit and the drill pipe from the hole, as we saw them pulling it out in triples. The well's dead. We then lower the 9 5/8 inch diameter casing into that same hole all the way to bottom. It's a continuous string of casing from the surface all the way down to 10,000 feet. Same story. We take cement, pump it down the inside of the pipe. The cement flows out the bottom of the pipe. It's followed by a rubber plug which latches in the bottom of the 9 5/8 inch casing, and we trap another cement sheath behind the 9 5/8. Now that cement sheath is not brought all the way to surface. It usually covers about the bottom 2,000 feet of casing, and in this case that gives structural backup and rigidity to the casing string and isolates the upper part of the hole from what we drill next to the deeper part. So, but we've already cemented off and protected all the surface fresh waters with 2 strings of pipe already, so we don't need to bring more cement up shallower. So there's 3 main systems on a drilling rig. The hoist, which is the big one we see, the circulating system, and then the blowout control system.
Drilling rig will be on location for about 6 weeks. We'll set various strings of casing in the ground. First off, to protect fresh water. Secondly, to isolate zones which may be productive of oil and gas from surface fresh water. At the end of the job, we will hopefully find commercial quantities of gas that we can produce. The drilling rig will move out and we'll install a production facility on the location, tie into a nearby pipeline, and the well will then produce for anywhere between 5 and 15 years.
When we return, we'll wrap up the drilling operation and take a look at the production phase.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities, to ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete, or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give. Advocate. Volunteer.
Live united. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it. Let's go.
So Daddy is on a flight home from Afghanistan as we speak. The Red Cross has helped me get the most important man back from Afghanistan so that we can have our baby.
What's happening?
Beautiful. What is all about home?
You already know VTX1 offers the best in television entertainment. But did you know that we offer premium programming for HBO? Upgrade to HBO and experience hit original series like Game of Thrones and True Blood, World Championship Boxing, and the biggest and best Hollywood movies. Get 7 great HBO channels and 2 more channels for our HD subscribers. All this for only $19 a month. HBO on VTX1. We've got you covered. Call 1-800-446-2031 to upgrade today.
Sumar's Andy Grubb was kind enough to take us through the three systems of a drilling operation. But what happens when drilling is done?
The drilling rig and the drilling operation for this well will take about 35 days, so a little over a month, maybe 5 weeks. After that happens, if we find oil and gas, we will remove the drilling equipment from location. We'll fill in that rat hole and mouse hole I told you about, and we'll be back to having a flat caliche pad with an assembly. We call it a wellhead or a Christmas tree of valves, again, that are used to control and keep all the formation fluids in the well so they don't flow uncontrollably. We will perforate. Perforating means we'll lower some explosive charges on an electric line down into the well so that we can set off those charges, which actually blast long, narrow tunnels through the casing, the cement, into that specific formation. We're very careful about how we position those guns. We want to make sure we only shoot the zones that have oil and gas. We don't want to make water or salt water or anything like that. Porosity and permeability are two important properties of the reservoir rock. Porosity refers to how much open space there is in the microscopic structure of the rock. We talk about solid rock, but rock isn't completely solid. It's made up of millions of tiny, tiny little grains of minerals or sand, and those little tiny grains are cemented together. And in between those little grains are little cracks and voids which make up the porosity. Now, just because they've got all those little cracks and holes in there doesn't mean that gas or water can flow through the rock very easily. How well the porosity is interconnected, one pore space to another within the rock, is a measure of permeability. High permeability rocks enable gas, oil, and water to flow very easily through them. Low permeability rocks, which is the primary reservoirs that are left in the United States to go for or to look for, are low permeability rocks. They won't flow naturally on their own, and virtually all those reservoirs that we go up for today have to be hydraulically fractured. It's a way of enhancing or amplifying the natural permeability of the rock. We're just giving Mother Nature a boost. The rocks we'll drill here have too low porosity or permeability to flow naturally on their own, so after we perforate, then we fracture, which involves pumping large volumes of water into the ground at high enough rates and pressure so that the rock literally cracks open. It doesn't crack open very high, but it does crack open usually through one formation, and then it'll go out maybe 500 feet or so. Now, if we remove the pressure, then the fluid will leak off into the formation. That crack closes. We've done nothing permanent for producing the well. So the fracked fluid contains proppant. It's shallow wells, it can be sand. In this deep well, it would be a manufactured proppant, as I say, some sort of ceramic or small pellets of an aluminum oxide or an aluminum ore. When the fluid leaks off, the frac fluid leaks off into the formation, those tiny pellets of proppant keep the walls of the fracture apart so that we create a pathway for the oil and gas to flow from the formation into the wellbore and then out.
It's also pumped at very high pressures. Typically, in the valley, when we're fracturing a well at 12 to 13,000 feet, as we will on the Studebaker property, we will pump at 160 gallons a minute, and we will be pumping at pressures approaching 10,000 psi. That would be enough to fill a typical swimming pool in about an hour or less. Wouldn't take long. So it's high pressure, high flow rates, and very expensive. You're spending money there at an incredible rate. Each frac job costs about, it could cost around $400,000 to pump. So you're spending, since the job takes about 4 hours, you're spending $10,000 an hour. So that's kind of fun to do that. You hope it all goes well, and you hope you get good results at the end of the day.
At the surface of the ground, we'll have some equipment to separate the formation fluid separate the gas, which will go into a pipeline. The oil will go into storage tanks from which it will be trucked to a refinery. And if we make salt water, which is naturally found in most rocks down deep, that will be trucked to a commercial saltwater disposal well, which we have one about a mile away.
We visited Presidio's saltwater disposal facility and spoke with Danny Guevara about the filtration process and how the salt water is pumped back down to the Earth's surface.
When salt water is found in the same formations as oil and gas, when operators produce gas wells, the salt water flows up to the top to the surface, and it is separated from the natural gas, the oil, and the water. As the water accumulates, trucking companies are called in to pick up the salt water and brought to facilities like my own. Every time an oil and gas operator produces a well, where we receive it, we process it, and we inject it back into the ground. The formations we inject to are formations that produce salt water. They're natural saltwater formations. There's no fresh water, there's no oil and gas, they're saltwater formations.
So the production is all automatic. It goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is monitored by usually 1 or 2 visits to the well every day by our field operations folks. Some people call them a gauger, some people call them a pumper. We call them a lease operator because they do a lot more now than just gauge tanks or pump a well. In addition to the human supervision that comes by once or twice a day, we'll have remote sensing devices to constantly monitor the pressures, flow rates on the well and the casing to make sure that everything's going normally, and to alert us if any of the equipment starts to malfunction.
When we find a new reservoir in a deep well like this, 12 to 13,000 feet deep, the natural pressure in the reservoir underground can be as high as 9 to 10,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, atmospheric pressure here on the surface of the ground is about 14.7 pounds per square inch. So it's very, very high pressure. The pipelines, which gather the gas from gas wells like we're about to drill here, typically run about 700 pounds per square inch. So we should have, initially, when the well is completed, sufficient natural pressure to force the gas from the reservoir through our production facilities into the pipeline, from where it will go to a natural gas plant. In this case, the plant is up near Falfurrias, actually La Gloria, and there the gas will be cleaned of any impurities. Some of the excess natural gas liquids will be removed. Facilities on the location will take out water that may come up with the gas and any oil that is also produced along with it. The natural gas comes out of the ground and it contains everything from methane, which is the lightest hydrocarbon, all the way to very heavy hydrocarbons, which make up natural gasoline. It's not like heavy crude oil, the black oil, but it's very clear, lightweight products. That's why we would take the natural gas into the pipeline to the natural gas plant. That's where those heavier molecules are separated from the light methane, which is what we burn in our houses and burn in power plants. Those heavier components will be used to make plastics or aviation fuel, gasoline, or to make the compressed propane and butane fuels that people use as fuels as well.
From places like this, oil and gas make their way to refineries and eventually to our homes and vehicles. To think it all comes from our own backyards, worked by the men and women who make up our communities. I hope you enjoyed this special look into an especially vital industry. For Our Community's newsletter, I'm Dave Osborne. Until next time.